Hello there, Precalc students. This is Mr. Kashi speaking. We're going to go through these video notes for our first section of Chapter 1. I am going to go kind of quickly through these notes, but it is video, so please feel free to stop it and make sure you get all the notes down on your paper. I think we're going to be going through 5 slides here. The first thing that we're going to talk about is a zero product property. We've touched on it before, but basically what it is if A times B equals 0, then either A is going to equal 0 or B is going to equal 0. And in this example, we're actually going to throw in a C, so A times B times C. And it says find all real numbers x for which 6x to the third equals 11x squared plus 10x. This is a rather involved problem, but first of all we need to set everything equal to 0. And it seems a little counterintuitive, but what I would do is I would subtract 11x squared and 10x from both sides, because I don't want to have an a that is negative. So I have 6x to the third minus 11x squared minus 10x equals 0. And then what I need to do is to solve this, I would need to factor it. Hopefully you see that each term has an x in it, so we can factor an x out, which actually makes our life a lot easier. So then this is going to go down to a 6x squared minus 11x minus 10, and that's still equal to 0. Now what we're going to do is we are going to factor it. And so here what we have to use is the AC method. So we have to do 6 times negative 10, which is negative 60. And then our middle term of negative 11 goes in the middle. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to negative 60 but add to negative 11. Whether you use your calculator or a factor sheet, that would work out to a positive 4 and a negative 15. So what we need to do is we need to split up this negative 11 into those two numbers that we found, 4 and negative 15. So I'm going to rewrite this. We have 6x squared. And I'm going to put the 4 with the 6. I think that might work out a little bit better because the 15 and the 10 have a common factor. Then what you would do is you'd split it up, and we factor by grouping, as we call it. So I'm going to rewrite this, but then a common factor of 6x squared and 4x would be a 2x, and what is left would be a 3x plus 2. And then factoring out a negative 5 from negative 15 and negative 10, so that would also be a 3x plus 2. And then what we would do is basically bring the 2x and the minus 5 together. So we have still the x out front, 2x minus 5, 3x plus 2. The final thing that you do is you basically, this is where the zero product property comes in, is that you have to set all these equal to 0. Well, the first one is rather easy. You have x equals 0, and then we have 2x minus 5 equals 0, and we have 3x plus 2 equals 0. For this middle one, add 5 on both sides, and then we have 2x equals 5, divide by 2, divide by 2, x equals 2.5, or 5 halves. And on this side, subtract 2 on both sides, 3x equals negative 2, divide by 3, x equals, we can just leave it as negative 2/3. So those are your 3 solutions. X equals 0, x equals 2.5, and x equals negative 2/3. This would be a good time to stop the video and record notes. I do want to go through and show you the graph. So what we found there were basically our x-intercepts. So if we go here, and sure enough we have negative 0.6 repeating, which is the same thing as the negative 2/3. We have 0, and then we have 2.5, which were the 3 solutions that we found algebraically. So the next thing that we're going to do is we have another example. This one is a quadratic. I'm just going to rewrite it right here first. But we're going to need some room for this one. Rewrite it right there, and once again I'm going to add 4x on both sides, and I'm going to subtract 8 on both sides. So I would have x squared plus 4x minus 8 equals 0. And none of those are like terms, so we can't combine any of them. And this would be the point where you would want to go over and find out two numbers that multiply to negative 8, but add to a positive 4. But the factors of 8 are 1 and 8, which are 7 away from each other, and 2 and 4, which are only 2 away from each other. So there's really no nice whole numbers that we can put in here, which means that we do need to use quadratic formula. So we have our a, b, and c. In this case, there's a 1 out in front of that x squared, which a is 1, b is 4, and c is negative 8. And the quadratic formula is opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Now what we need to do is we need to plug in those values. I'm going to change thicknesses of pen here. Hopefully, maybe not. So we're going to have x equals opposite of 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 8, all over 2 times 1. I'm going to go ahead. We need to simplify this. So we still would have negative 4 out front. And we're going to have 16, which is 4 squared, minus 4 times negative 8. That would be a negative 32, all over 2. And 16 minus a negative 32, that would be a positive 48. So we have x equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of 48 divided by 2. This is a point where I would basically split this apart and plug it into my calculator. So this plus or minus is where we would split that apart. So you'd have a negative 4 plus square root of 48 divided by 2, and another one would be negative 4 minus square root of 48 divided by 2. And you'd want to hit the enter key on your calculator before you divide by 2, just so you don't need to use parentheses for your order of operations. After you do that, you should get two solutions that come out to be decimals, because if they were whole numbers, we would have been able to factor it, and it would not have we wouldn't have to use this quadratic formula. So the two solutions that you get from the one from adding is 1.46, and that's rounded to the nearest hundredth, and then this would be a negative 5.46. Those would be your two solutions. If you need to take notes, finish up taking notes, I am going to switch it to the graphing screen. So if you need to pause it or rewind, this would be time to do that. So we have up here is y equals x squared plus 4x minus 8, which was our equation, our quadratic equation. And if we go to our x-intercepts, we have negative 5.464, which was our negative 0, and our positive 0 was a 1.46, which was rounded down from the number that you see there. So now we're going to kind of step back and do something a little different and talk about some problem solving, and then do a brief problem solving activity dealing with a linear equation instead of quadratics. So there's four basic problem solving steps. that we want to kind of be on the same page about. So first one is understand the problem. The second step would be create a plan. Third would be carry out the plan. And then 4, make sure you look back and that you answered your question, you solved your problem. If you didn't, you'd have to probably start back at problem 2, create a different plan, and repeat. So those are the 4 main problem-solving steps that we want to follow as we go forth here. Here's a problem that we want to use those 4 steps. There are engineers at an auto manufacturer that pay students 8 cents per mile plus $25 per day to road test their new vehicles. And this is a 2-part question. So how much did the auto manufacturer pay Sally to drive 440 miles in one day? And B is John earned $93 test driving a new car in one day. How far did he drive? So first of all, we're just going to have P as pay. That'll be one variable. And M is going to be miles. So we have, we're going to set up an equation. So the amount of pay that you get is 8 cents per mile plus the $25 for the day of road testing. And so they want to know if you were to do a 440 mile trip, how much pay would you get? Well, P equals, we're going to put this 440 in right there. And if you were to multiply that and add that out, you would come up with an amount of $60.20. Then for part B, we're using the equation in a different way. We're still going to use this P equals 0.08 M plus 25, but they tell us the pay. So here we're going to be plugging in the 93 in for the pay, and then we're going to be solving for M. So here you'd subtract 25 on both sides, and you'd get 68 equals 0.08 M, and divide by 0.8 on both sides. You would get M equals 850. So that would mean that in order to earn $93, you would need to travel 850 miles test driving the cars. There is one last slide on grapher failure and basically seeing hidden behavior, and we're going to go over that as a class, as a large group, and not in this video session. So this will be the end of your notes. If you wrap this up faster than the other groups, you can start on your assignment that should be over on the whiteboard on the side of the room.